My name is Aisha Whitty, and I'm the Administrative Officer for Lincoln Fire and Rescue. And today we just want to walk through the stages of the hiring process within our department and tell you just a little bit more about our department. This presentation's been part of our joint LFR workshops, and we're just going to give you kind of an abbreviated version of that workshop here today. So first, I want to just kind of walk through what we're going to go through here. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about our department, and we're going to talk about what we look for in a candidate. Then we'll go through what happens when you get an offer, and then what happens after the offer. And we'll just touch briefly a little bit on station life and why LFR. I'm not a firefighter in the station. I work at headquarters in the administrative offices. So station life's not my everyday. So we'll leave those stories up to the firefighters we can kind of hook you up with. Serve as mentors as we go along. So one of the first things I want to talk about is we have a new chief. He's been chief since May, but he's not new to the department. Chief Engler's been in the department more than 25 years at this point, and he rose up through the ranks. He always wanted to be a firefighter since he was a little boy, and Lincoln Fire is where he wanted to be, and thought when he was a paramedic that was the greatest job he could ever have. And then when he became captain, he felt like that was the greatest job he could ever have, and he'd be captain forever. But then we had a new chief in our department, Chief Despain, who came along, was kind of a mentor and had a different leadership style than maybe our department had experienced in the past, and really inspired Chief Engler to become chief. And he hopes to be a long-term chief, and what that means for us at LFR and for the city is really great things. Because not only does he love LFR and love being a firefighter, is that he intends to be a longer-term chief as long as it all works out. And what that means is he's got a good sort of understanding of what the problems are and what life's like for firefighters and where Lincoln particularly can improve. And he's going to be a little bit more in the weeds than, say, a 3-year chief who's going to come in and want to do good things and, build up their resume. He's going to deal and is dealing right now with problems that are a little less flashy, but that mean a lot to our firefighters in the field and also for our city just in general. And that's him with the mayor, who he reports to, and I report to Chief Engler. I think it's kind of important just to break down the leadership in our department. I mean, our org chart's a little complicated, and we're working on that. But basically, we have 2 assistant chiefs, and that's a change. Our second assistant chief will start in the next few weeks here and has just been named. So we'll have an assistant chief that looks over support services. And for our department, that's the urban search and rescue team, our logistics office, the EMS division, and training and some other things like that. But our new operations chief is going to oversee the 6 battalion chiefs in the field. And every day we try to get to 88 firefighters, and that's captains, drivers, and firefighters and paramedics. That's our daily head count that's contractually required. And there are 2 battalions chiefs on duty each day that serve a 24-hour shift and oversee those 88 folks that are in the field. So in addition to the 6 battalion chiefs, 2 for each shift, we have 3 administrative battalion chiefs. There's one chief, Chief Jones, who I work really closely with in our headquarters office. And he likes to tell people that he's in charge of everything that plugs in. But he'll also tell you that he's in charge of performance management and data and that type of work. We also have a battalion chief in charge of training. And then our battalion chief that oversees the urban search and rescue team. Our department also has 2 division chiefs, one that oversees our fleet and logistics and facilities. So he ensures that all of our apparatus, all of the engines and ambulances and trucks and chiefs' cars and everything else are in working order. And he's actually a civilian, and that's the division chief positions were intended to be available and open to civilians if possible or if needed. So he serves in that position, does a tremendous job, is a huge asset to the department and the city in general. And then we also have a division chief that oversees our EMS division. And the EMS, basically, in that division, it deals with billing for ambulance services, the EMS protocols, paramedic education and licensure, all of those types of issues. And part of the rationale behind that being a division chief is there's some business knowledge that goes in that every firefighter may not have. We've been very fortunate to have a chief in that position that's done really well. It's made us a high-performing EMS department, but that's kind of how that all breaks down. So I'm the administrative officer, and that means different things for different departments. Not every department has an administrative officer, and I've also found that that can mean different things for different chiefs. But in my current role, I do what basically I think describe as chief works that chiefs don't like to do. So it's like HR and budget and recruitment, which is an exciting part of the work I do. So when you're applying to LFR, we end up being in contact quite a lot through the process. And I report directly to the chief and work on special projects for the chief. Our previous chief, when he liked my advice, I was a fixer, and when he didn't like my advice as much, I was his handler, and that's kind of how we can still continue to work. I work pretty closely also with our public information officer, and right now that's a captain in the field, and it's usually an operational position, so somebody that has firefighting experience. And what the public information officer does, in addition to just helping the community learn more about our department, is she'll respond to fires in the middle of the night and talk to the reporters so that the chiefs and the firefighters can focus on resolving the emergency. And she's also learned, over the years that firefighters have their own little language and how to kind of translate that. So that's one of her biggest responsibilities. We already talked a little bit about our training division, our logistics division, our EMS division, and I'll talk a little bit more on our next slide about the Urban Search and Rescue Team, which is unique to Lincoln and a huge asset. One of the other things that we have, every day in the field, there's an EMS supervisor, and you'll see them around town. They have the coolest car. It's like a red Tahoe, and the newest one. The chief's actually a little jealous of their red car. But what they are, basically they're there to provide support to the paramedics in the field. They're going to respond to the most serious emergencies and be a mentor. And then they also have a number of other duties that just help keep us as a high-performing EMS department. So our Urban Search and Rescue Team is pretty cool and it's unique. So this is actually a federal agency, and our department, Lincoln Fire and Rescue, sponsors the Urban Search and Rescue Team. And so they respond to emergencies, and people on our department who are on the Urban Search and Rescue Team were at 9/11. They were at the Columbia Space Shuttle crash, and they're out basically saving people from swift waters or Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ida. But the cool part about that is that means that opens up a lot of career development opportunities for our firefighters on the job. Because once you get a little bit of experience and you're off probation, you're able to apply to the Urban Search and Rescue Team. And we had their dog handlers. There's a lot of opportunity for specialization. If you prefer a little bit more of the administrative aspects of the job, you can do that. If you like to be out there in the water or on a helicopter, you can do that. And so it also allows our city to have assets, resources like boats and other things that we wouldn't normally have that are, basically federal property, but we have access to. But I just think it's a cool thing. And, the chief that I work with had a canine cadaver dog that he's used in rescue teams. And right now we have a search dog that's at Station 9. I like dogs, so that's an appealing part of the Urban Search and Rescue Team for me. But for candidates and for our firefighters, it's a lot of opportunities to just do more and engage more and use their skills to help not just the city, but our whole country, basically. Another important aspect about our department is that we're busy, and we're only getting busier. The city of Lincoln's growing at a pretty rapid rate, and that means that if you want to work for our department, you have to also want to be busy. The chief will talk about, pilots didn't go to pilot school to sit in the airport. They went to fly the plane. And so when you're going to paramedic school and you want to be a firefighter and you want to actually get experience, we're a good department for that. I mean, we have stations that are busier than others, but as you can also see, a large portion of our calls, 82% last year, are going to be EMS calls. So if the medical side of the job appeals to you more, there's a lot of opportunity for that. And We did still also have about 300 or so fires, so you'll get the whole gamut in addition to every other type of emergency situation to respond to. If you like hazardous materials response, for example, and the whole chemistry aspect, there's a little bit of that for you there too. Another thing that I think is important for people is like as we go through this and we talk to candidates and just as a point of personal pride, working for the department and living in the city of Lincoln is to point out that we have a very high performing EMS department. And within our current structure and training structure in our department, that means that we have to be selective in the paramedics that we're hiring, but because we want you to be a high performer and to be able to follow those protocols and go along. And not everybody knows this, it's one of the things we talk about, but we're probably second in the nation in terms of cardiac survival rate. And that means all of the factors that help to ensure that if someone in our city has a cardiac event, that they're going to survive, and not just survive, but thrive afterwards. Our department has 16 stations all across the city. The goal is to have a station located everywhere across the city so that an engine can be anywhere within about 4 minutes. That's sort of the standard, and arriving quickly really kind of affects outcomes, has a bigger impact on outcomes than maybe always just the care provided. So that's why we have stations all across the city, and they're varying degrees of age. We have new stations, brand new stations where our firefighters have their own bedrooms and nice bathrooms and beautiful facilities. And we have stations like the station I'm at, Station 1. It's from the 60s and looks like it. It's a mid-century marvel, but it also means that our firefighters sleep in a dorm room. And so it's one big open room, and it's a little bit of a different accommodation, but a busy station. And they're sort of all have their own charm. And people oftentimes in the beginning say they want to only be at one station or another station, and then they end up for whatever reason having to work at a station they didn't anticipate, and all of a sudden that becomes their new favorite station. So we hope that there's kind of a place for everyone, but one of the things our department takes very seriously is safety. And as you can see here in the slide, we have a separate storage area for the gear. So the contaminated gear is contained and not in an area where it's, the gases coming off of it are going to increase cancer rates, for example. And we'll also be building Station 17 in the next couple of years and probably not slow down. So 16 stations means 16 engine companies. Right now we only have 4 trucks companies in service. And that's one of the first things that I learned when I came to work for the fire department was the difference between an engine and a truck, and have to do a little bit of translation work. So trucks are the ones with the ladders and the engines have the water. And we've actually had only 4 truck companies in our city since like the 50s. And we're working very hard and very diligently right now to be able to put a 5th truck company into service. We also have 7 medic units or ambulances, but we know we need 8. So we're trying to figure out also, one of the things that we're working closely with the chief on is how do we fund that 8th medic unit that we need to ensure that we keep our performance levels where they are and provide the citizens with the service levels that they've come to expect. But it's expensive to run an ambulance with, a paramedic and another EMT driver, and to keep that staffed and going. So that's one of our big challenges right now, but we'll only continue to grow. One of the other things about our department that's important to point out is that we have a high rate of female firefighters. The national average is about 4%. Our department is about 12%. And so we want to ensure that our department's a place where everyone feels welcome and included and has opportunities. And so, one of the things when we're doing these workshops that I like to point out is if that's not something that appeals to you, then maybe our department's not the right fit for you either. So just to keep in mind, that the makeup of the department is one of the things that we feel kind of strongly about. and want it to be a place where everyone is going to feel included and welcome. And so we had a really great opportunity recently, and I like to think of the quote that when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? When there are 9. Well, when are there enough female firefighters? When we have 4, a full company. And it just sort of happened one day that we ended up with an engine company that were all female firefighters, and they got a fire right off the bat that day. And I think this slide's also good for kind of pointing out that firefighters come in all shapes and sizes. I'm 5'5", and I think I might be a little bit taller than Captain Katie Brown, but Deborah Mead, she's over 6 foot, I think. So, it's not just a tall, fit guy's job anymore, I guess. Also, one of the things we have a lot of resources and a lot of momentum going is we really want our department to reflect the community that it serves. We know that when you're able to speak the language and you look like those you're serving, that when they're in those times of crisis and the firefighters show up and they feel like they might have a connection, that's helpful. We've got one Vietnamese firefighter who's able to do kind of that translation work, and we're always sort of looking for more opportunities to better represent the community we serve. So the impetus overall for these workshops was to help candidates kind of learn what it was going to be like if they decided they wanted to become a firefighter, or how to be successful in our processes. So really we want to get you to here. And here's one of my favorite aspects of the whole recruitment process, and that's our badge ceremony. So at the end, once you've been hired and you've gone through that whole process and you've successfully completed the academy, we have this great night where your loved ones can come and support you and eat cake, and the mayor's there and city council and pin that badge on you, and the new firefighters take their sort of oath of service. And it's just like a really great time to sort of celebrate all of the work that went into the whole process, and just kind of be at the beginning of what should hopefully be a really great career. So you can see how happy both the chief and the mayor are at this event, which always makes me happy. And for me, it represents, just a culmination of a great deal of work. These are all people, we try to have about 15 people in each of our recruit academies, and we don't always get there. So, these 8 people we have up here, that's a lot of work, and that's a significant milestone and achievement for them to make it through our process. And that's kind of where we sort of want to walk into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of it all, and just sort of emphasize that, people that are on our department are very successful, rock star firefighters and paramedics. They didn't always get chosen to be in the department their first time around. And I think some of that will come to be clear. But the reason we also have so many components to our process is that our department's putting a long-term commitment into you as a candidate. And that means that it's 25 years, and we want to make sure we can all get along, and that we're not going to see your name in the paper because it's not a random person has a DUI, it's firefighter has a DUI, and there's all of those things that we have to consider, and just want to make sure that not only do you know what you're getting into, but that we can feel comfortable sending you into people's homes when they're in a time of crisis, for example. So more than anything else, what we're looking for really is just that integrity and character, which can't always necessarily be taught. And it's also that you can play well with others and that you have that strong work ethic, right? Because we're going to send you into the stations and you're going to be around people 24 hours a day, and you're tired and you're up all night. And that's when people their filters kind of, they're in less control of those things. And we don't want to hire people that are going to go into the stations and cause drama and be negative and cause that additional emotional drain. But we also put a great deal of trust in you, like I just mentioned before. You're going into people's homes when they may be incapacitated, and we need to be able to trust you and work hard. And more than anything else, this is what struck me as I come to work in the fire service is when I was holding these workshops and I'd have individual firefighters come and help. The first thing they do when they get there, first they get there early, always early, 15 minutes at firefighters. It's a red flag actually when we have candidates that are late because it's not the firefighter mindset, and then it's immediately like, what can I do for you? How can I help? And so what we look for then in candidates is we talk to your previous employers and all of those and ask, what type of employee that you were. So if you want to be a firefighter, you're working on that now by building those relationships and demonstrating your work ethic. And every chief's interview, almost every candidate comes in and says, I'm a hard worker. So my recommendation always is to kind of come up with those stories and examples about your life that demonstrate that you're a hard worker. Don't just tell us, how do we know? How have you shown that you're a hard worker? Because it is hard work, it's 24-hour shifts. But the other story that I kind of like to tell about this phase of the process is recently we had a firefighter who was on what we call light duty or temporary modified work schedule because she's pregnant. And she's fairly new to the department. She was helping me on a huge project to get all of our previous application files in order and stuff. And she comes to me one day and she's like, why did you hire me? She's like, there are all these other candidates that had certifications and experience. I didn't have that much experience at the point in which you hired me. And it was like, we knew that she would be a good candidate because the project she'd been working on for me had been lingering for years, and we'd had others worked on it and hadn't made much progress. Within 3 weeks, she had that completely done, and had just built a really great name for herself. And I think that that's something that the other firefighters usually point out during this process is that you make a name for yourself early on in your career on what do you want that to be. You want to be a hard worker and somebody that people want on their shift and want to work with. And so we just look for those people that are naturally going to have those skills and don't have to work very hard at working hard and being somebody that everyone wants to work with. But just in terms of the general logistics of it all, so first of all, you have to apply on the city's website. We have an application process going at this point. And we usually do a pretty good job on our social media of indicating the dates for those application periods. But we at LFR don't see you until after you've passed the online exam. And the exam, I always tell people not to get too nervous about that. We're just looking in the online exam, do you have basic academic skills and reading comprehension skills to be able to be successful as a firefighter in the academy? So don't stress out about that part of the test. It also has some basic character and integrity questions in it, but it's a really simple sort of civil service test. So after you've submitted your application online on the city's website, you'll get notice from our HR department that you'll have 24 hours on a certain date to take this online test. And so then after you've passed the online test, that's when you are referred over to our department and we'll start scheduling you for different interviews. The first interview we do is our captains and stakeholder interviews. And so typically, because we're interviewing everyone at this point that passes the online exam, the last few rounds we've done up to 200 of those interviews. And so it'll be a captain currently in the field and a stakeholder from the community. And what they're really looking for in that process is just some of those initial character and integrity types of things. But also just, we like to have a stakeholder there because we say, is this somebody that you would trust helping you in a time of need? And then the stakeholder sort of offsets because sometimes captains might have an idea of what a successful firefighter is, or someone may come in and they're like, you remind me exactly of this person. And we kind of want to have a little bit of balance in that process. And so that's why we have a little multiple people that kind of participate in that part of the interview. So it's a kind of, Chief Desmain always called it speed dating, and I don't know how I feel about that, but it probably does sort of amount to that in the sense because 2 very short panels you meet with, and then advance forward. And so while we structure our process so that everybody gets a chance at that point, and part of the thinking behind that also is that Our department used to just take the top 25 highest scoring people on the online exam. But what we also know is that sometimes the best test takers aren't always the best firefighters. So we're hoping to, through the captains and stakeholders interview process, by interviewing so many people, that we kind of open the door for you to be able to shine if test taking is not your best skill. So after that process is when we have to start narrowing it down. Paramedics will also meet with, if you apply to our department as a paramedic and not just as a firefighter, our paramedics also go to our EMS panel for interviews, and that's the division chief of EMS, a stakeholder from the community, and maybe other stakeholders that might sit on that panel. And what I want to emphasize for that interview, if you're a paramedic, and just in terms of advice, is study. They ask general knowledge type questions in that. And as a paramedic, they're probably things that you should know. But if you've studied, you're at least feeling probably a little bit more confident about your answers, and you're expecting to get the types of questions you're getting. Others have said that maybe looking at our protocols, which are available online, is something good to study from. But the questions aren't based on our protocols. It's just general knowledge questions. But I've sat through those interviews, and it's obvious who's studied and who hasn't. And I think that's just in part because of their confidence level, but you want to be able to answer the questions and not nervous, because I think that the paramedic interview is probably one of the more intimidating aspects of our process. But yeah, so after the EMS panel and after the captains and stakeholders interview, is where I sort of mentioned before that we have to start really narrowing it down. So we can interview 200 people at the captain's interviews, but the chief doesn't have time to sit with 200 people. And we usually end up getting something to more like 30 or 40. So we've taken the scores from the captain's interviews and narrowed it down to the top scoring people for the chief to interview. It's usually 2 chiefs, and it's been our fire chief, and Chief Inkler will participate in the interviews in these coming rounds as well. And the chief interview is just a conversation. At that point, we've already decided that you're probably a pretty reasonable fit for the department, and it's just kind of your opportunity to further demonstrate that. And people say, like they're always surprised it's a little bit more casual an interview. I mean, you still want to show up in a suit and be prepared for a job interview, but it's really just an opportunity to have a little bit of a conversation with the chief, and then we go from there. But as you can see, we start out with 200, we narrow it to 30, and then background checks are what happens next, basically, after our physical ability test. So we have to have kind of like a tenable pool, or a reasonable size pool, so we're not overburdening the background check process after that. So after chief's interviews, if we decided that you'll move forward, you'll go to the physical ability test, and you'll get notified pretty much right away. And that's the advice that we've given in these workshops is you can practice on the treadmill, and you should do that now, because the physical ability test, you need to be able to run 1.5 miles on the treadmill in under 15 minutes. So you can start practicing for that now if that's something you see yourself doing in the future. Okay, so the background check is probably one of the points in the process where I get more questions about what that's going to entail. Even when I was hired, I did the background check. There's a 35-page form, and you're basically telling your life secrets. But what we're not looking for, what past mistakes have you made, or what, but are you going to be a trustworthy candidate going forward? So you'll need to provide at least 6 references who will be able to tell the captains completing the background check a little bit about you. But don't think that they're only going to talk to those 6 people, because they're going to figure out who else they might know that knows you and your previous employers, and talk to them as well. And we'll ask a little bit of information about just your experiences, and kind of it's an opportunity for you to sort of talk about yourself in a little bit more detail. And one of the things about the background check process is that it goes at your pace. So you have a 35-page form to fill out. And the faster you get that back to the captains completing the process, the faster you're going to move through the rest of the process. And that affects your seniority down the road. So that's my background check tip. But my second background check tip is 100% be honest, because if you don't tell the truth, they're going to figure it out at some point. We can deal with past mistakes and transgressions when someone's shown that, they've learned from their mistake and they're not going to repeat it. But we cannot deal with people that aren't going to be truthful, because we're sending you into people's homes and we're relying on you to write reports and provide care and to get along with everyone in the station. And that's just the most important part of the process. If you can come in and be like, yeah, I got this minor in possession when I was in college and I haven't had anything since, that's what you want to do. Just be as truthful and as open as possible. And the background check process the information is kept pretty tight. And within our department from that point on, it's the captains and the chief and usually me, and that's it. So don't feel like you're telling your life secrets and everybody's going to know, because it's a small circle of folks that are privy to the information you share there. So once we've decided that you're a good fit for the department, you'll get a conditional offer. And that's usually an email from me, and I'll give you some information that says, don't quit your job yet, but you're really close. And the next step then is to go to a medical evaluation and a drug test. And drug test, obviously, you know what to expect there, so that's easy to prepare for. But the medical evaluation, you will be doing a little bit of physical ability type tests, demonstrating that you have, there's some strength components to it and some other things like that. So you'll have the morning to prepare for that. And then probably the second most intimidating aspect of our process, it's a very important part of our process, is our psychological evaluation. And at the workshops, we have a firefighter who's fairly new to our department and had been a police officer with LPD for a while. So he had the opportunity to sit with the psychologist that does our psych evaluations multiple times. So he was willing to share his experiences. And he said, it's kind of weird. So you go in and what you do is you basically take a series of tests, and then afterwards, Dr. Connor, the psychologist, will ask you about your responses on those tests. There's no right or wrong answer, but there is, better or worse fits for public safety careers. And things we're looking for there are again, honesty, character, integrity, but also resilience, and how do you handle stress, and what coping mechanisms do you have in your life now to sort of manage those things. This is the point in the process when the firefighter who's been doing these workshops with me likes to point out that if you do have any issues with alcohol or drugs, it's take care of them now before the academy. And because it'll start to come out in these processes, and you'll want to also just be honest about those things in your life, because Dr. Connor, the psychologist we work with, she's super well respected in her field and has a lot of experience working with police and firefighters, so she knows the questions to ask. And the other piece of advice that they had, the insider advice on this one is that so you answer all these different assessment tests, and if you fall asleep and start answering differently, she's going to pick up on that and ask you about it. So just make sure you pay attention through the whole process. And my second piece of advice is treat that like a professional interview. Don't show up in yoga pants. It's important that you treat Dr. Connor with respect and not chew gum and be on time and all of those things as well. And then after the psych eval, usually pretty quickly after the psych eval comes your phone call from the chief, which is a great, exciting time. People do cry and have cried, and so feel free to cry if you get the call from the chief. But just look forward at that point in the process, and that's when you can quit your job, and we'll let you know the start date for the recruit academy, and also the date for the meet and greet. And the meet and greet's a unique opportunity, and that's a time where you can bring your family members, and we have a little dinner, and we kind of walk through what you can expect as a recruit as you begin the recruit academy. But we also have a little bit of a separate breakout session for whoever your support person is that comes with you, or your support people. I've held babies at the meet and greet. You know, it's a really interesting and really worthwhile event. So if you are offered, if you do receive an offer from us, I encourage you to attend that, but not only to attend it in person, but to bring your support person as well. And we'll talk to them about the fact that you're going to be tired and dirty, and all the things that you're going to be going through, and what they can do to support you. And so the Recruit Academy, what I like to talk about, or what I think is important to emphasize, is it's 19 and a half weeks, which is a long time, but it's a short time in the grand scheme of your whole life. So you want to be prepared for it, both mentally and physically, because it's it's rigorous. You know, you start very early in the morning with a workout, and you're there all day. And you know, people don't always keep in mind how exhausting it is when you're learning new things, in addition to all of the physical elements of the Recruit Academy. You know, one of the things, though, if you're not prepared for it, sometimes we do have the ability to maybe delay your start to the next Recruit Academy. But just be really clear that it's a time in your life where you're really going to need to deal with other distractions. You know, it's not a good time to plan a wedding, although we've had that happen. It's, you know, babies happen too, and you know, there are all the things that happen in life that are outside of your control. So we try to work with you and support you as much as possible, but to the best of your ability, you should try to get your life kind of squared away so that you can focus on the Recruit Academy. After this, we usually kind of like to have members of our department talk about what it's like in the stations and why they chose LFR. So I would encourage you to come to one of our workshops, or to get in touch with me, and we'll provide my information later. And we can set you up with someone in our department who can answer questions you may not feel comfortable asking me or other people as a part of the process, but also so they can tell you what it's really like, what it means to be with somebody 24 hours a day in an ambulance, and you know what dinner's like, and why there are 3 refrigerators, for example, in every fire station. But that's basically it. So that's all your insider tips on the how to join LFR and what you might be getting into with the process. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, and we'll provide my contact information. But that's it.